Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for this Perspectium webinar, Implementing SIAM at Zurich Insurance. My name is Andrew Pritchard. I'm Director of Marketing at Perspectium, and my apologies for the scratchy voice. One of the joys of air travel is you get colds, so sorry if I'm a little hoarse and whispery. We're joined today by two special guests, and we love it when we can hear our customers talk about their environments. And Craig Edwards, who is the head of service management for the Oklahoma City hub at Zurich Insurance, and his colleague Barry Wells, who's one of the senior ServiceNow solution architects, are going to be talking about their environment, what it was they were attempting to achieve, why SIAM was important to them, and some of the challenges they had to overcome. Donovan Stone, who's solution architect in Perspectium, will then show you how the product works. We're not at liberty to show you the exact Zurich Insurance system. There's some privacy issues there, but what we'll be showing you is the environment in which Perspectium can benefit those who are looking to do SIAM and to have e-bonding with their third-party service providers. A couple of housekeeping notes. The session today is being recorded, so thank you for your questions. And if you have questions, we won't open the audio lines. We'll take all the questions through the question box, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. We find that hearing dogs barking in the background isn't that conducive. So please post questions at any time. We'll either take them as we go through the session or hold them to the end. It's also fun when you have two people driving the same car, so this will be fun. But what we're going to do now is I'd like to introduce and ask Craig and Barry to give us an overview. So tell us a little bit about your roles at Zurich. What are your responsibilities, so that everyone can begin to recognize your voices. And set the scene of what you do. So, Craig, let's start with you if we can.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. All right. My name is Craig Edwards. I'm the head of the Zurich Services North American IT Service Delivery and Integration Hub. It's a big, long title. Basically, Zurich has two service integration hubs, one in Dublin and one in North America. The team here in North America is based in Oklahoma City, and here in the hub, we're responsible for governance and oversight of all SIAM processes in North America and Latin America, and for also for support and development for Zurich's ServiceNow platform globally. So we do all of the ServiceNow work here in Oklahoma City. Our team supports 5,500 process users and over 70,000 portal users around the globe. We have 6 engineers doing that, and then our architect who's joining me today is Barry Wells, and I'll turn over to him to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Barry Wells, and as they said, a ServiceNow architect for the ServiceNow platform at Zurich, and a lot of things I guess that I'm responsible for are around the platform itself and stability and helping to, getting designed any integrations and around upgrades and how we manage our ServiceNow infrastructure.
Excellent. Thank you both. And there'll be a quiz later to see if everyone can recognize your names as you're talking. So let's get started. The first thing I'd like to cover, if we can, is what were the problems or what was the business need that you were looking to address with this project? So, Craig, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so Zurich Insurance is a global insurance company made up of lots of business units in lots of different countries. We have relationships all over the globe, really, with different service providers that provide, for the different countries they provide SIAM services or just IT services across to the business. The hubs were created several years ago to start to consolidate this function and standardize it. And with thousands of IT users and data centers around the world, we partner obviously with a lot of different third-party service providers, each who have their own tools. We found when we rolled out ServiceNow that we weren't going to do a lot of integration. We were going to try to drive everyone to our platform, and we're finding that in not every case that's possible. So we needed to integrate our global help desk, for example, with these different service providers, tools, and we decided to investigate broker technology, and I'll let Barry talk a little bit about why we went down this path, but we decided to go down that path after trying to do web services directly and APIs with just our incident and problem management modules. So the problems were twofold. One was we tried to use the web services and APIs to connect, and we found that to be possible, but difficult to support and troubleshoot with failed transmissions, no way to effectively trace issues or recover transactions in a hurry. So we first set out to see if we could find a tool or a solution that would help us manage that more effectively without having to add an army of integration specialists. The second issue we needed to solve was the volume of integrations. As we've matured with our ServiceNow deployment and our SI offerings, we're finding more that the policy of not integrating isn't tenable. So we were going to have to integrate with a number of different things in the future. Our strategy and our roadmap kind of indicates that, and the more successful we are with ServiceNow in the SI world, the more different business functions and IT functions need to reach out to us to integrate. So we wanted to have a standard way of doing that. So once again, so I wouldn't have to stand up an army of integration experts, and we can manage it, cleanly within the tool. So that's kind of the two problems we set out to solve originally. Barry, I'm going to on the technical stuff. I'm going to kind of lean on Barry a little bit to make sure I didn't leave anything out. But Barry, does that kind of cover what we did?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it really come down to just the issues that we had integrating with those third parties. From a web services perspective, it was a big challenge, and it was hard to manage with as small a team as we're running with.
Okay, you mentioned that you tried the web services and APIs before you called us, and this is more of an ego stroke for ourselves. Had you looked at any other vendor offerings, or was Perspectium your first call?
We basically did a industry search. So we looked at several different opportunities and alternatives. We took some advice from ServiceNow on what the leaders were, that sort of thing, and did our own research. Cool. Obviously, I'm not at liberty to say what we looked at, but we did look at other solutions and ideas. We really did the equivalent of an RF, request for proposal from different people, and looked into it.
Well, we were very happy you chose us. So now I have, and thank you for sending this before. I have your environment slide. Talk us through this. Talk us through both, what the implementation looked like, where you were prioritizing, and how you decided to do what you do. And there's one element to this that I think would be very useful for our listeners or viewers, were there any differences that you either encountered or planned for because it was a SIAM integration rather than internal integration in terms of planning or implementation?
Okay. I can answer that from at a high level. I'm going to need to have Barry talk about the technical aspects, but at a high level, your question is can you repeat it? I'm not sure I got it. I apologize.
So how did you approach the integration across your environment was part A, and part B was, were there any things that you had to do differently when you were integrating with the third-party service providers versus when you were doing internal integrations?
Okay.
And that could be either from the technology perspective or the process or relationship perspective.
Right. So I'm going to start with the third party. We had to integrate with a large third-party global provider that we partner with, and the technical challenges weren't really I'm not going to say relevant, but they weren't really where the rubber met the road for us. Where we had the most challenge was sitting down with their technical groups, the third-party service provider, and talking through the connections early on in the first integration, for example. And Barry can talk more to this, but in the first integration, Perspectium solution involved, or the preferred solution involved, implementing an agent on the target, the third-party service provider's environment in order to talk back with us, and our third-party service providers weren't interested in that at all. And so we worked with Perspectium, first of all, to come up with an alternative solution, which is what we use today. Barry can talk more to that. The real challenges that we found, though, were sitting down, and this is, I can't stress this enough, sit down early with the third-party provider or whoever you're integrating with, whether it's internal or external, and do a serious use case-based mapping of those of the fields. Get your databases lined up, understand what the values are, the data dictionaries. That work there pays off huge dividends later in the project. So that's the kind of the I won't say political challenge, but the non-technical challenge was actually the bigger challenge. It took the longest amount of time for us to kind of learn the languages of each of the well, first of all, we had to learn how to talk to Perspectium, then we had to learn how to talk to our third-party vendors on that level. When they were, the third-party vendor was skeptical about us coming in with this solution. Barry, can you talk more to the technical issue we had with the agent?
Yeah, the particular one was Remedy, and with the Remedy environment, it's a little different as far as utilizing web services, because there was really no opportunity to even discuss utilizing the agent, and the guys at Perspectium come back to us with the possibility of developing the SIAM piece. That gave us the opportunity to where the Remedy team could consume and connect our endpoint, and we could connect to theirs to create that two-way integration. It come down to understanding how their endpoint exposed those mappings, and just kind of working through those details.
Okay.
So then the second half of your question was internally. All we have so far internally with an integration is a SQL reporting database that we stood up ourselves, and obviously that was pretty easy for us to do since it was us talking to us. So and then making it available to others to integrate with. When we talk, I think in a little bit we might talk about our future plans. We do have a plan to integrate with one of our other business units who have their own, are standing up their own ServiceNow instance, and I think the challenges there are going to be probably less, because it is ServiceNow to ServiceNow. So the data dictionaries will line up, the designs will all line up. That should be a fairly easy conversation, especially since we have the experience we have. And then also, they will have the agent, we'll have the agent. So I mean, it's going to be just like for like, kind of talking to each other to keep things synchronized in a hub and spoke relationship.
Okay. I think you answered this, but let me ask it just to be on the safe side. Are you what kind of integrations are you using Perspectium for? Is it the transactional, or is it also the batch reporting integrations?
It's transactional. The only batch reporting one that we're using Perspectium for right now is that reporting server that you see there on the left of the screen.
Okay.
We currently run. Or we currently have the two large successful integrations today, and we're really happy with the reliability center on that. We're in the planning stages for 3 more over the next 6 months, and right now on the transactional side, we're currently replicating around 1 million records per month. The on the reporting one, that's pretty straightforward and internal, so there's not much to that one. The transaction one's really where the heavy lifting has gone on so far for us.
Okay, cool. Just as a reminder, or for those who joined slightly after we started, we are taking questions during the session. So if you've got questions, if you want to pose them through the question feature in the GoToWebinar box on the right-hand side of your screen. Talk to me about results, because this has been running for a while now. What kind of results are you seeing, and how many integrations are live today?
Okay, so as I said, we've got two large ones alive today, and I say large, they're larger than the reporting one, and then the one reporting integration. We've got plans for 3 more over the next 6 months, and as far as reliability, performance, and manageability of the integrations, we're very pleased. We had a situation at one point where one of our internal business units was wanting to get a direct integration with ServiceNow in order to get real-time information on incidents as they occurred, and we pointed them towards the SQL Server to run their application because it was going to be polling, and we just didn't want the overhead on our current implementation of ServiceNow. And we pointed them at the reporting database, and they didn't think that was going to be good enough because of latency. What they found out was that there was no perceived latency in what they needed. They were able to get within seconds. It wasn't immediate, but it was within an acceptable amount of time that data was there. So, so far with the volumes we're pushing through and with the implementation we have, performance has been good. I don't have any metrics in front of me, to quantify that, but we're very pleased with how things are running, and how I think from the technical teams that I talk to on a regular basis out here, they're really happy with how easy it is to manage. When there is a hiccup or a transaction that doesn't, appears to be lost or hung or whatever, they're able to get to it, find it, and manage through it without all of the headaches that they had back when we were doing it just with web services. Barry, again, I'm going to defer to you if there's anything you want to add technically, because Barry gets nervous anytime I start talking about technology or saying things like web services or APIs. So, Barry, if you'd like to kind of fill in the blanks for me, that'd be great.
Yeah, in reality, I think the only time that we really ran into a snag is that Remedy integration that is we're sharing incidents with. They have a limitation on attachment size, and that was resolved, and we kind of cleaned that up initially with I think it was the very next upgrade of the SIAM piece. So to help us better manage those attachments, because that endpoint had actually a really small limitation on the size of the attachments that we could send them.
Okay, cool, thank you. We've had a question come in. I'm not sure, I don't think this creates any NDA question. Are there numbers available on the effort and duration per the integration with non-ServiceNow third parties? How long, from when you started working with us, how long did it take to actually get into a production environment?
So our first one took longer than it should have. Because we were learning how to talk. We were working with Perspectium on getting the SIAM piece put together. So I kind of exclude that one as a learning curve. The second one we did, again, a majority of the time that was spent was mapping out the use cases. I can give you an example. Barry can probably give better examples, but example like if an incident is a particular type or a category of incident, how do you want that routed and classified on both sides of the ticket, and what you have to set up the rules for how that record is treated on each side back and forth as the conversation is what I call it goes on between the two systems. Those are complicated, and however long that takes, that took us, I'll be honest, the first one took us months But once that's done, the implementation and configuration, et cetera, could be done in weeks, a couple of weeks tops. The real challenge to setting this up, from what I could tell, from my level, was the real challenge was getting the two teams to speak the same language and to design the right rules and touch points for the transactions. Barry, do you have any insight on the actual technical perspective?
Yeah, well, and also the first one, some of the time was our provider, the person that was assigned to us to work with us, did have to go on leave for a period of time, so and didn't have a backup. But and I guess the example of our SQL servers, we were ready to go within a week on SQL Server, but we do follow a global change process and had to wait on our change window. So I think it ended up being 3 weeks before we actually implemented the prod. But it was ready to go with 1 week. And as far as the building and configuration, it's going to vary depending on what that if that third party you're integrating with, how much flexibility they have within their endpoints and how they consume data, because whether that data, any transformation that has to occur, if it has to occur in ServiceNow, or if that development work happens on the third party's API. So there's variation, but I think it's really down to it can be implemented with even with a remedy system. It's possible that it could be done in 4 or 5 weeks and have it ready in production if all the pre-planning is done ahead of time.
The infamous pre-planning. Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like if the service provider had let us use the remedy agent that we had, then it might have gone a little quicker. But that's one of those hypotheticals. We'll never know. So, Craig, you've alluded to future a couple of times. What is next? I mean, where are you going with Perspectium? Where are you going with ServiceNow? Where are you going with SIAM?
Okay. Yeah, we've got. I'm pretty excited. We've got a roadmap planned out in our strategy. As I mentioned earlier, the business and the business has seen the successes of what we can do with ServiceNow. I've heard about a lot of functionality that's in ServiceNow beyond SIAM, and as a result, our roadmap is exploding. We're currently undertaking a ServiceNow upgrade to Jakarta, which includes a number of strategic changes to modernize our current environment and remove some of the heavy customization we did before we knew better. By doing this is going to enable us to kind of leverage ServiceNow beyond SIAM and map with the business vision. That's going to involve a lot of integrations and replacement of a number of key IT services and support applications globally. So it's going to radically expand our service catalog, for example, and portal to automate some of those IT service deliveries across the board. That vision and strategy is going to drive the need for us to integrate with other key services, around event monitoring, potential of bringing in the HR module or a procurement module, finance, facilities management, those sort of things. So we've established our standard as, we're going to use Perspectium for all integrations. That's, pretty much not negotiable at the time being, and our we're going to leverage that going forward. Another thing that's going on with us in the near future is more SIAM. We haven't finished rolling out globally yet. We've still got some ways to go in LATAM and some ways to go in APAC. We're starting APAC. So over the next 12 months, we're going to bring on our Asia Pacific business units and the rest of our LATAM business units. And as we do that, we'll need to be integrating with their service providers and their ticketing, their help desk systems or their ticketing systems as well. So we have more of that coming in the next 12 months as well.
Excellent, and I love that at the moment, just to keep us on our toes. That's always good.
I'm going to keep you on your toes, man.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Barry. If you can hang around, we don't have any other questions lined up for you yet, but we'll keep taking them through the session. What we're going to do now is I'm going to introduce Donovan Stone, who is our solution architect. And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to not touch my keyboard. So Donovan, you should be in control. If not, let me know.
Okay. Am I coming through audibly?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Okay, so let's see Perspectium in action. A little anticlimactic because I do want to hit a few slides, kind of discuss some high-level points about how we actually work with SIAM. Whether it's an MSP or a managed service provider providing that SIAM use case, or whether it's the end customer themselves, there's some pretty unique points about how Perspectium goes about it, and I'm going to go through a few slides, and then what we'll do is we'll jump into the tool, show some data actually moving for a few of our live endpoints or our demo endpoints, and then discuss those components that actually make up the SIAM integration and how easy it is to kind of configure and adapt to your SIAM needs. So kind of a standard slide here. Perspectium really, integration and service, and the native app in ServiceNow really makes the tool the flexible piece. Obviously ServiceNow has capabilities of integrating via web services. There's several components there that you have to build out. Well, what Perspectium done is taken essentially those components and really built on top of them to provide all of the configuration and error handling and message handling that allows you to go in and really make these SIAMs plug and play. Our message broker service that lives in the middle there is a queuing service. So it also takes a load off of the ServiceNow instance. So no longer will you have integrations that are just pounding your web service API, your REST API, whenever they want to. Now the intermediary layer allows you to kind of put a buffer in between your ServiceNow instance and whatever integrations or tools or service providers that may be trying to access the data on that ServiceNow instance. It also will queue up that data, allowing those records to ensure that they're not lost. If for some reason either end of that integration goes down, you can be sure that the message broker service will continue to queue up those records, and when that other side of that integration reconnects, those messages will be delivered and there will be no data loss. So when I was thinking about the integration for SIAM, and a lot of customers will think, oh, okay, well, I can just build out my web services integration, and I've done that before. I may do it for incident management, I do it for problem management, but the idea is to be able to utilize Perspectium to make this essentially plug and play. So I was thinking of an analogy, and I was reading a little blog recently about how people still are out there, searching for jobs. Economy's charging right now, but there's a lot of companies that are still requiring individuals to go out and fill out resumes, or send an email attached resume, or fill out online forms. And if you're doing these individual connections, it's very repetitive. It takes a long time. They're static. You fill it out once, you're not able to reuse it, and it's inefficient. You can spend an entire day having to rewrite your resume, even though you've already written it once and you send it over an attachment, or filling out specific questions that you filled out 4 or 5 different times, but it's on 4 or 5 different job sites. So this is an analogy with building out those singular web service integrations. Someone comes in, you pay them thousands of dollars, they build it out, and then if something changes in your business process in the future, you have to bring someone else back in or have an integration expert come back in. It's not reusable, not easy, not plug and play. Well, in the job hunting world, the game was flipped upside down really when LinkedIn came in. So instead of having the individual connections one by one, and you're filling out the resumes, checking out those lists, there's now a singular common place, or a common data model, if you will, where employees or potential employees can go and fill out in a standard format, and they can have their other employees or coworkers endorse them. And then the employers can go and look at that single place. It's reusable, it's flexible. If I need to change something, if I need to put a certification on there, essentially changing some of my process on my end, it's fast and affordable. I don't have to worry about spending a lot of time, you know, redoing this all the time. I build it out once, and I don't have to worry about, you know, sending or redoing the same thing over and over again. And really, that's what ServiceNow has done, or that's what Perspectium has done with ServiceNow's common data model. So we've taken the ServiceNow data and standardized that into what we call the common data model for all of our SIAM integrations. So by standardizing this, we're able to plug and play with a lot of the tools out there, and even a lot of those managed service providers that may have those gateways in between them. So it's not just a standardized out-of-the-box tool that we're integrating with, but it may be something very unique that, you know, a managed service provider has configured. You can reuse this common data model over and over again. If you need to make changes to it, whether it's on your side because you have unique process or something as simple as a custom field, or it's something where that end service provider or tool has a unique mapping that you might need to change. It's flexible, it's fast, and it's affordable. Affordable on price and affordable on time, because no longer are you rebuilding those integrations over and over again. You build it once, and then you're able to utilize that common data model to plug and play. So this common data model is really kind of one of the main aspects, not really on the technical side, but more on the kind of theoretical side of, you know, how are we being able to build out this data model? How are we able to plug into these multiple SIAM providers quickly and easily, getting those customers up and running in the matter of weeks instead of tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars and months. And then once that integration's built, it's static. We're flexible, we're fast, and we can reuse this common data model. So what I'll do now is I'm actually going to jump into the tool itself and go through some of the components of, or first I'll go through and actually spin up a few integrations, you know, show you how data flows back and forth, and then we can go through and discuss how that data is actually going. So first off, I have a standard instance of ServiceNow. And you know, there are a lot of times that customers are going to use something like Remedy. They're going to be using something like Jira. It really depends on what their use case is. So if I go out and simply create, you know, an incident here, send my assignment group to hardware, and submit that, this is built into my process. You know, this is now not just an ETL tool that is going every 15 minutes and picking up any new incidents and being sent across. This hardware indicator here, because this service provider that I'm about to send this off may be my hardware provider, or maybe, you know, managing my servers. This is now in my process, so I can say anytime there is a hardware incident, I want that to be sent off to my Remedy or my external service provider, or if I have maybe an internal group that is using Remedy because of an acquisition. You know, even though it's not true SIAM by an outsourcer, it could be considered SIAM internally. So by creating that webinar, or by creating that incident, assigning it to hardware, I can go over to my Remedy instance here, and I can look at all of my incidents. Oops. There we go. And you can see this webinar test comes through. If I open it up, it's assigned to the right person. We've mapped out the impact, the urgency, and when I get into our table mapping, I'll show you where you have control in a few places to actually map that. And like it was stated earlier on the call, a majority of actually building out integrations with Perspectium is not actually the technology side. It's going through the mapping process, whether it's through an Excel spreadsheet or some other document, and just saying, hey, field A maps to field B on my side. But Perspectium provides you with the capability to quickly map that and adjust that to your process, whether you have unique process on the ServiceNow side, or you might have some unique mapping on the endpoint side, whether that's a tool or, like I said, a managed service provider. So if I dive back into this webinar test incident, and for those that are familiar with ServiceNow, you can quickly go into, show XML, or I can make these fields visible. But I can see that I have a correlation display here of 129 and a correlation ID of incident 125. So we have the pre-built integration to not only send those out, but we can configure the tool to send a webhook or send something back, so we're able to get those integration correlation IDs back in and truly EBON that to the incident. So any updates going back and forth, any attachments sending back and forth, it will be EBONing, and we'll be able to take near real-time updates from both sides. So the way this works, and if any of you have been on our previous webinars, is we have something what we call a dynamic share. So I'll look at our Remedy SIAM integration, and these we have two basic ways of sharing data. One's a dynamic share, near real-time transactional data. We also have something called a bulk share, where we can do exactly like it's named, bulk data, something that doesn't have to be quite as near real-time, but also maybe larger data sets. So I'm going to go through this dynamic share quickly and just kind of touch on the key points and show you where the configuration can occur. So initially, you're going to pick the table that you want to send out, and if it's going to be a create, update, or delete. And then you have the ability, once again, to set this assignment group to hardware. So as I sent out that incident, I did set that assignment group to hardware, and that's enabling me to actually produce this integration, once again, integrate it directly into my process. So I don't have to worry about, okay, having a SQL query or having some other kind of query and seeing if that data is going to be sent across every 15, 20 minutes. I'm doing it as near real time as possible, just like if everyone was using the same tool. In the additional settings area, I can see that it's actually going out to this remedy queue, and that's something that is provided in our cloud broker service. So when we queue up these records, we have the ability, of course, to pass them over to other tools. We can use web service push if necessary. So we have a web service handler, so we can actually hit an API if it's exposed. If there's a customer that has something behind a firewall, we do have the ability to utilize an agent. So this queue can be sent to an agent. It can be sent to a web service handler. We have that type of flexibility, that foundation for us to be able to integrate. And then this table map is really where that common incident model or common data model is actually produced. So this is an extremely flexible tool, and I'm gonna go into this common data model and really kind of discuss how we're able to do some of this mapping. Before I get into the mapping, I want to check with Andrew. Are we getting any questions in, or is this a good time to pause to see if we had any questions?
There is a question that's come in. It's actually for Craig. So what we'll do is we'll hold that to the end.
Okay.
There's nothing yet. I have one for you, but I'll ask it after you finish the table mapping section.
Excellent. Okay. So a lot of times process is going to change. And if anybody is configured or anybody works on ServiceNow, there's rarely a standard out-of-the-box ServiceNow instance. There's either custom fields, there's custom values, choice lists. The tool is so flexible that as soon as you get your hands on it, you're generally shaping it and molding it to match your process. And that's where Perspectium excels, is we're able to match our integrations or your integrations with the process that you're changing on the front end. So this table mapping allows you just to pass across standard fields like close code here can be over to close code. But you'll also notice that there are things where I'm taking the caller ID's first name and I'm mapping that to caller first name. Right, caller first name is not a field on the incident form, but because we've put that in our standard data model, now any tool on the other side that wants to receive that has the first name field available to them. So, it might not have to live on the form itself, but you're able to reach out and pull those data points in. As I scroll down, you can also see in some of these other fields that we're able to utilize this script condition here, where caller full name can be, and I'll open this up and give you a little idea. It's current caller ID first name plus current caller ID last name. So there is a full name on the user profile, but this is just an example about how you can actually go through and start to utilize ServiceNow's scripting capability that's innate in the product, but quickly and easily adapt that to your integrations. So if I needed to do a specific type of mapping for choice lists, if there were required fields, or one of the more common ones I've seen out there is actually hard coding an assignment group or an end user to the other endpoint. You know, when that integration is received on the other end, you may want to assign that to yourself because you're the company that sent it over there. So what you can do is come into this source script space, and you can simply put something like answer equals, and you can just hard code something in there, company 1. Now every time that goes across, it's going to say, okay, company 1 will be that assigned to field that you're going to receive. You don't have to worry about whatever the incident form says. You're able to kind of override that. So it gives you a lot of strength, a lot of flexibility to really input data into that common data model. And if there is something that is unique, whether it's on that endpoint or on your process side, you can map it here, or you can add it to that common data model simply by adding a new field table map here, and it gives you that flexibility without having to rebuild the entire integration. So that is one area of mapping. It provides you that flexibility, very intuitive way to add fields to fields and process utilizing the table maps. Andrew, I'll pause here for a second, and like I said, check for questions, or go ahead if you had that a question.
Yeah, there's one that I've got. We were at the ServiceNow Now Forum events last week in DC and also in London, and something that surprised and pleased a lot of people when they saw it, and it's easy to miss, the checkbox for attachments. Can you talk about what's involved in creating integration to share attachments if you're building it yourself versus just checking a box in the interface?
Sure. Yeah, and that is a common question too, because it does become very difficult, especially if anyone knows behind the curtain how ServiceNow stores attachments. So there's a couple tables that encompass an actual attachment. There's essentially an umbrella record, and then there's other chunks of the attachment that is split up in 8K in sections. So not only would you have to go in and build integrations to these tables, ensure that there is referential integrity, but you're going to have some sort of logic that's reassembling it. And that's where ServiceNow sends that data out to Perspectium, and the logic in Perspectium, the MBS, or the message broker service, allows us to reassemble the package, send it over as a true attachment, and attach that to whatever record that is being already shipped out. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can either send that over in a dynamic share where you have a checkbox, and you can see in specific dynamic shares, you can include other tables that need to be included, so audit logs, attachments, reference records, or we also have the notion of embedded related records. So if I head back over to my table map section, you can see here that I've got incident to common incident for remedy. I also have a JIRA integration, incident to common incident, or change to common change. But if I open up, for example, this JIRA integration, we have this notion here of using embedded table maps. So I have another table map for the PSP attachment table, and you may have seen that on the previous screen. And if I note that in my common data model that I want to embed that, it simply embeds that information in essentially in an XML payload, and will send that out together with the parent record. So when you're talking about building out related tables, related integrations, it comes now down to the point of just adding a table map, adding specific fields, and then embedding that into whatever table that parent is. So it speeds up that process immensely and gives you that control and that flexibility, because you're not building out a completely separate integration, for instance, like on the attachment table. Instead, I'm just adding the attachment fields, the data, the byte, the file name, etc., and I'm including that on something like my incident or my change. And I can reuse this table map on those other processes. If I want to integrate change management to something like Jira, I can use this standard attachment table map over and over again, and I don't have to rebuild that integration to include attachments for my change process.
Perfect.
So,
thank you.
Absolutely. Just to go into, another one of our integrations, Jira is very common, and we see that a lot, and it's really part of the deployment process, it's part of the development process for most organizations that are developing software. So if you're looking at the table maps, once again, you can see that we have the individual, pre-built integrations for things like Jira, but it's not just to incident, it's also to change. So a lot of times a change request might end up having to be an enhancement or a feature or a bug, or maybe it's even an issue. So we have that ability to say, we're going to take a change record, we're going to send that up to our common change, and then from that point we can have a common change point to whatever we need to, and that's actually occurring in our cloud broker service. But some of the pre-built functionality or some of the pre-built mapping we already have in our tool are things like mapping out some of the forms or some of the fields. So if I go into category, I can see that inquiry in ServiceNow can equal inquiry in Jira, but maybe category software is going to equal bug in Jira. And incident request is request, and everything else can go as an incident. So this is where you're provided the flexibility of going in and saying, you know what, actually this bug needs to be, this could be issue. Now I've changed that. Simple, easy to understand, very intuitive. If I update that now, anytime it's set to software, it's going to actually send over issue in my common data model. And then from there, I'm able to map that to whatever field I need to in Jira. So this is, the table map allows you to really provide that common data model, whatever process and data you need on the front end before it goes out. And then on the way out the door, once it hits our MBS, we're actually, we just, with our most recent release called Argon, and I'll touch on our releases in a second, we're providing the customers, or our customers, the ability to actually map that out a little bit further. And we have a new tool called SIAM mapping. So hopefully this isn't getting too down in the weeds, but it does show the flexibility and ability to be able to go through and map not only on the front end, creating that common data model, but what that's aligning to on the end customer. So this is a new feature, like I said, in our Argon release, and similar to ServiceNow cities, we're actually naming our releases after elements. Our company name is obviously Perspectium. It's an element of perspective for those who are curious. So we're going to start seeing alphabetical names of elements out there, starting with Argon. But once you've created your common data model, you can actually reach out to the MBS itself, pull in, let's say I'll pull in a remedy mapping, and from here, this will provide me with, creating an incident, common incident. These are the mappings that I'm using. And if I click on them, I can actually see the mapping that occurs. So here, the description is actually taking from our common data model short description. Urgency is actually taking from urgency in our common data model. There's hard coding capability here too. So status I can always set to assigned. So I could have done that in my table map itself, or I can lock that down in the SIAM mapping page. There's a couple places you can do that, but it gives you that capability to not only configure it, but if you needed to create a new mapping here, you can create that mapping. You can upload that mapping into the MBS, and now we're actually providing a user interface for our customers to be able to interact with the mapping, select the fields that endpoint is now going to receive, instead of just the data that it was going to receive like we provided with the table maps in the past. So it really, once again, allows for a plug-and-play type interface for table maps, for dynamic shares, for bulk shares, and then once that data is integrated, once you have all of that information, you can then, of course, offload that into something like a data warehouse, a MySQL database. We have the integrations to be able to push that data out to yet any other endpoint and take it and consolidate it for big data reporting, analytics, etc. So, you know, the foundation is there. We do have integrations with Remedy out of the box. We also have integrations with Jira. We were just at the Atlassian show last month, and had a lot of interesting traction from the developers up there that were interested in integrating with the ServiceNow tool because they didn't want to work in ServiceNow. Developers wanted to work in Jira. So we have that capability to send data back and forth. We have the pre-built integrations, but more importantly, we have the foundation. If there is some sort of other integration tool out there, we have the agents, we have the mapping tool, and of course we have the ability to allow our end customers to go out and say, you know what, I want to create a new dynamic share and put that data in a standard format in a queue in our MBS, and then let some other endpoint be able to receive it, whether it's a tool like Service Manager, Remedy, Sharewell, or whether it's a true managed service provider like AT&T or BT or HCL or Infosys. We can build out those integrations that can talk to their gateways, which then can be routed to their end tool on the other end. And it's process agnostic, so we can adjust to their process just like they can adjust to ours. So those are the main components of how we're flexible. And once again, the common data model allows us to be plug and play. So, you know, like I said, we've had previous webinars on the MSP, allowing for multi-vendor and also Jira integration. So if you have any questions on those, feel free to look back in our history and maybe take a look at some of those webinars that we've had in the past too.
Perfect. Thank you. Donovan, can you put us back in the slide?
Sure thing.
While you're doing that, Craig, one of the questions that came in for you is, what is the Zurich support model for ServiceNow in terms of the number of people, the types of roles and locations, and more importantly, for this webinar, were there any extras required to support Perspectium?
Our model here is we've got the architect Barry that's on, and we've got 6 developers. That's what we've had pretty much all along. We didn't add any for the Perspectium integration. We went down this route of a message broker in order to, part of how we justified it was our ability to manage complex integrations with some simplicity, so we wouldn't have to add people. We're really trying to stay, you know, very lean. Our team is all located here, so we're supporting, you know, the global instance of ServiceNow for all countries, all users from here in Oklahoma City with our 6 people. I think that answered the question.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Thank you very much. As Donovan said, we've taken to the elements table for the naming of our releases, and the Argon release, we actually have a webinar scheduled for November the 1st, also at 9 a.m. Pacific, to go into the details of what's new. You've got a little sneak peek today, but registration is now open on Perspectium.com. It's one of the hero banners on the homepage. So if you are currently a customer, would like to know what's new, or you're investigating and would like to find out what we're all about, then the Argon release webinar is coming up. This webinar will be recorded. It has been recorded, and it'll be available also on Perspectium.com through the resources page, probably in the next day or so. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions after the fact, by all means, drop me an email, andrew.pritchard@perspectium.com. And thank you for joining us today. Craig and Barry and Donovan, thank you so much. Craig and Barry in particular, thanks for being willing and able to share how Zurich has benefited, and we wish you all the best in the future. And that at the moment thing, that's going to stick with us.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.